Florida Beekeepers Association. And I want to introduce the speakers we'll have here for you today. This first gentleman is not a speaker, but he's the president of the Marion County Beekeepers Club. So we're glad that he's here. He's done a lot of work to set this up. Over here in the whatever color that is.
Hot pink.
Hot pink. That's Suzanne. She is the president of the Alachua County Beekeepers Club. She does double duty. She's also the president of the Columbia County Beekeepers Club. On the far end, that beautiful young lady is going to do a presentation this afternoon after Dr. Ellis is finished. Her name is Devin. 12 years old, right, Devin? She's going to do a PowerPoint presentation for you, so make sure you stay around for that one. Right behind her, Jim Whiteside. This is the world-famous watercolors. He's donated several of his paintings to raise funds for the Honey Queen program for the American Beekeeping Federation and our local clubs. Thank you, Jim. We'll go here to Dr. J.D. Ellis. He's over the Bee Lab at the University of Florida. If you're a beekeeper, you know Dr. Ellis. The next guy is a great friend. That's our mayor, Jim Cooper. He's a great guy. He'll do anything to help anyone that lives in this city. And even if you don't live here, he'll welcome you to come and move here, right, Jim? Next to that is our most important person today because she's going to be our MC. This is our American Honey Queen, Gabrielle Henderson. I call her Queen Belle. We thank her for coming all the way from Iowa. She's going to do my job. She's going to MC today so I can go and take pictures and relax and get some rest because we've been running. She's been on Channel 20, WGN. She's been doing a lot of promotional work for this. And from the look of this crowd, she did her job. Okay, with that being said, I'll let these guys get off stage, except Ruben. You guys, we'll see you in just a minute. You can stay here. The reason I'm asking Ruben to stay up here, I have an award I want to present this as the founder of many, many clubs in North Central Florida and the North Central Florida Beekeepers Association. I watch the members, I work with the members of these clubs, and I see who is doing really a good job of keeping bees and saving bees. That's our purpose. The whole purpose of our club, it's not fundraising like a lot of people think it is. We need a few dollars so we can help the public learn about bees. But this young man right here, this year is our 2015 Beekeeper of the Year. The reason he gets this award, and there's other people in our association that are deserving of awards, but not like this man. He outworks me. He does more bee rescue. That's what we do. We want to save honeybees. He'll go anywhere, anytime to save them. So he does a great job. Thank you, Luke. I really appreciate it. I have one more award to give, and to me, this is a special award because I work with all these new beekeepers that are learning. Most people that are beekeepers, and I think Dr. Ellis and most people that have been around a while, they can tell you a first-year beekeeper knows everything there is to know about bees. And they'll tell you so. And they'll argue with you. And everyone is entitled to keep bees any way they want to. It's their responsibility. But I watch these beekeepers, and I work with a lot of them. This award is the most improved beekeeper. This is the person I see has made the most improvement, learning, really wanting to save bees. And this year it goes to Mr. Donald Thompson. Don is new to beekeeping, but he is one of the best, hard-working beekeepers I've ever met. So thank you, Don, for all you do. Okay, now I'm going to get out of the way and turn this over to our beautiful honey queen. Thank you, Gabrielle, for being here and for supporting our clubs and all the hard work you've done on our behalf. And you're not done, because tomorrow, at noontime, she'll be in Hitchcock doing a cooking demo or talking to you about bees or whatever you want to talk about. So with that, thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Gabrielle Hemsap. I'm the 2015 American Honey Queen. I came here from Iowa to talk to all of you. This is actually my third time in Florida as the American Honey Queen, so way to go for being the state that has me the most often. Fist bumps. I started keeping bees when I was 12 years old at a commercial bee farm called Fastbinder Apiaries. I love my job. I have 2 hives of my own now. Their honey just got harvested, and last night I ordered my bottles, so I'm really excited. I'd love to talk to all of you about honeybees, answer any questions you have, or just hear your story of what got you interested in honeybees and how your hives are doing. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dr. Jamie Ellis. He's a researcher at the University of Florida. And for those of you who haven't met him or haven't had the chance to hear him speak yet, he is a wonderful speaker. He's a great guy. You're going to learn a lot. And I'm really happy to get to hear him speak again. So this is great for me. So please give him a warm welcome to the stage.
So I've been playing with the lights a little bit, and they're continuing to beat me. I'm going to try to dim them down these 2 middle rows so that the screen can be a little bit more easily seen. Does that sound okay? I'm going to mess up, so they're all going to cut off, and it's going to look like they're not coming back on, but it takes a while for them to warm up. All right? So no PhD in light switch jokes while I'm back here behind the stage. Okay. We're not completely incompetent. Completely. All right, so I'm going to try to stand up here on the stage, but I like to get a little bit more personal and closer, so we'll see where I end up. A lot of it has to do with how this clicker and I function together on that data projector. So like the Queen said, my name is Jamie Ellis. I do work at the University of Florida. I've been there for, I can't remember, I think about 9 years now. And so my family and I actually live in High Springs, just down the road. I come past this school every morning when I go to work in Gainesville. I've been keeping bees since I was 12. I still have bees. That seems to be the question that I get most at the end of all of these talks. Well, do you even keep bees? So I do keep bees. I have 5 colonies in my backyard. And I always tell people I'm a hobbyist beekeeper at home and a commercial beekeeper at work. So those are the kind of the 2 different lives that I live, at least with regard to bees. So Mr. McChesney asked me to speak to you today about bees. And he kind of suggested some beginner-oriented topics. So what I thought that I would do is I thought that I would give you a little bit of an overview of honeybees, and then we'll take a break, and then we'll come back, and then I'll give you an overview of getting started in beekeeping. So let's talk about this, or let me ask you a question. How many of you are beekeepers? Okay, so keep your hands up. Longer than 5 years? Longer than 10 years? 20 years? So 15 to 20 years? How long have you been a beekeeper? I'm sorry, I can't hear. How long have you been a beekeeper? 11? All right, good deal. Anyone been a beekeeper longer than 11? 30 years. 30 years. Okay, that's good. That's got me. You got me by 5 years. That's good. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce you. So how many of you are not beekeepers at all, but you came here because you think you might want to be? Okay, very good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce you to the bee first, and then I'm going to give you an introduction to beekeeping. We're going to stop about halfway through so you can have a break, and then I'll be finished my entire morning spiel about 12. Around 12, I'm told that both the mayor and or the honey queen will both be having bee beards applied to them around lunchtime. Do you know what that means? That means they're going to have a big, huge cluster of bees hanging from their chin. So essentially, you have to wade through me for about 3 hours to get to the real entertainment. Okay? We'll be taking audience volunteers as well once they're done. Okay, so even if you've been beekeeping 30 years, I hope that something in this lecture will be useful to you. Now, a lot of people take notes when I speak, and a lot of people go to sleep when I speak. So for those of you who take notes, I'm going to try to help you out here a bit. I was in London speaking to at the London National Honey Show back in November. And in November, they had professional videographers everywhere and professional mic people and all the stage equipment, and they recorded me giving this talk, and it is online for free to watch over and over again at YouTube. Okay? So you can just you go to YouTube and you search Jamie Ellis UK National Honey Show or something like that. So Jamie Ellis UK National Honey Show. And the thing about it is I'm going to kind of abbreviate this one, and the one online is a lot longer and a lot more detailed, and you'll probably learn quite a bit more if you watch that. You may never want to see me again after this morning, but in the event that you want to hear this again, it's online, very, very professionally produced. So we're going to start from the beginning, and I'm going to see if I can do this from down here. Is this okay? I'm afraid of microphone feedback. Good, this seems more personal. All right, so let's start from the beginning. There are 3 kinds of bees that live in your bee colonies, and they all come to you in a different way. So we're going to start with the egg, and then we're going to end up at the end of this talk with the whole colony, and I hope somewhere between the egg and the whole colony you get amazed. Okay? This is my appreciation of bees talk. What I hope to leave you with during this talk is the fascination and wonder of the things that you either currently work with or that you aspire to work with in the near future. All right, so queen honeybee lays an egg. That egg can be one of 2 things. It can be fertilized or unfertilized. And we're going to talk all about bee sex in about 10 minutes. So that should keep you awake long enough to get there. So we've got eggs that can be either fertilized or unfertilized. So let's follow these eggs to their logical conclusion. If the queen elects to not fertilize her egg, it becomes a male honeybee. We use the word drone. Drone honeybees are males. Male honeybees have no fathers. They come from unfertilized eggs. Just for science sake, see, some people are already amazed. That's good, I'm done. You guys go enjoy the rest of the morning. In science, bees, wasps, and ants all occur in the same order, and they all have this type of reproduction. So all male bees, wasps, and ants come from unfertilized eggs, which means they have no fathers, but they have grandfathers. Right? Maternal grandfathers, but no paternal grandfather because they don't have a daddy. I'm from Georgia, so I don't say daddy, I say daddy. So just to let you know when that starts coming out later, that's what's happening. I'm still talking about the same thing. Okay, so if the queen elects to fertilize that egg, it's going to become a female. So fertilized eggs result in females, unfertilized eggs result in males, and that's where the queen loses control. She can control the sex of the egg, but she can not control anything else. At that point, the worker bees take over and feed those developing larvae that emerge from those eggs. If they feed those larvae a lot of food, those females become queens. If they don't feed those larvae a lot of food, those females become workers. So workers are underfed queens and queens are overfed workers. That's it. When they are babies, the diet that they receive sets them on their path to being either queens or workers. Now listen, I could pretty much spend nearly all day on this idea because it's a fascinating idea. I want to say it again. Males come from unfertilized eggs, have no fathers. Females come from fertilized eggs, and the workers, depending on how much food they feed those female babies, control whether they become queens or workers. The reason that is important scientifically is because workers and queens have exactly the same DNA and exactly the same genes. One could have been the other. So really, what you have here in the bee world is an example of where diet controls the turning on and off of genes such that you have queens or workers. That's fascinating. A lot of people think that the big differences between humans is that we're so vastly different genetically, and it's not. It's simply the turning on and off of a lot of genes. I have some turned on and off that you don't have turned on and off. You know, a lot of people say, oh, you know, we're 97% related to chimpanzees, and it's the 3% that makes us different. It's not the 3% that makes us different. It's the turning on and off of the 97%. I always tell people I can make you hairy back scratchers if I had enough time with you in my lab. So it's important to think about how genes work. So it's neat to think about. And oh, by the way, full disclaimer, I do not read my slides, so it probably says something like that behind me. Now, let's focus a little bit on the queen. So the queen is the one who has the ability to lay eggs. She's the one who produces all the offspring in the colony. She's larger than the workers. She can lay 500,000 eggs in her lifetime. She also produces a pheromone bouquet. So queens exude smells, and these smells have behavior effects on the nest. Queens do not control anything. In fact, queen is a misnomer. She doesn't control anything. She doesn't reign in the colony. She makes no decisions except lay an egg or not lay an egg. Workers collectively make all of the decisions, and that's important to know. So queens are able to kind of make the nest stable because they produce these pheromones that let the workers know that she is present. When those pheromones are absent, the workers detect the absence of those pheromones, and they begin diverting a large number of the female offspring into the queen direction. Make sense? So let's talk about this some more. Queens will then go to the combs, C-O-M-B, comb, made of wax, full of these little hexagonal cells, right? She'll back her rear end into those holes and deposit an egg. Put a queen on a virgin comb, that's a comb that's never been used before. She'll usually start in the middle, and she'll lay eggs in a spiral pattern radiating to the perimeter of that comb. She does that so well that spiral pattern we call the brood pattern, because brood is the term for baby bees. And queens always lay in these kind of squashed oval patterns. In fact, we put bees in cube boxes, but bees build circular nests. If you could remove all of the honey and all the pollen out of the nest, what you would be left with is a brood nest that's roughly the shape of a squashed basketball. It's pretty neat to think about, huh? Because we think about bees and these cubes and all these sheets of comb, but really they're building these squashed basketballs around which they're storing honey and pollen and things like that. So much so that what you tend to get is these round brood patterns. Then the bees will store a layer of pollen immediately above that brood pattern, because the pollen is what they need to turn those babies into adult bees. And then everything from that pollen strip up is honey. So think about it this way. Think about that basketball. Think about that basketball having an upper layer of pollen. The upper half of that basketball being completely coated in pollen, and then everything above that pollen jacket is honey. That is how bees develop nests. That's how they do it in the wild. That's how they've been doing it for a long time. Okay? All right. So, let's talk about drones. Drones are the male honeybees. Remember, the interesting fact you learned about drones is that they come from haploid eggs, or eggs that are not fertilized. So drones are haploid, females are diploid. So, drones have only one job. They have only one purpose in life. Someone's already read that purpose in the chuckle. It happens to be a female. I know what you're thinking. I've had this comment a lot. Drones' only job is to mate with the queen. That's their only desire in life. That's what they wake up in the morning wanting to do. That's what they go to bed wanting to do. All right? All right. As a result, They're completely preoccupied with finding a queen and mating with her. All of this takes place in the air, and I'm going to tell you about it in a moment. And they have large eyes so that they can find the queens on these mating flights that I'm about to describe. So you'll notice that drones have extremely large eyes compared to the queens that are significantly reduced, and compared to the worker bees' eyes that are also significantly reduced. All right, let me slowly get there. All right, now drones with these large eyes have to mature sexually before they ever leave the nest. So essentially the first few days, weeks of their lives, they just sit in the nest and eat. They are so underdeveloped otherwise that they don't feed themselves. The worker bees have to feed them. So drones sit around all day until they mature. They get fed by their sisters, and when they're old enough, they start going and looking for girls. No human parallels, please. All right? Now, drones are so useless outside of that task that when winter comes and no new queens are being produced, the drones are considered rubbish, and the worker bees will actually kick them out of the nest and let them just starve to death out there so that they won't tax the resources during winter. Okay, so the drones that make it to fall die at the hands of their sisters who rush them out of the nest and keep them outside the nest. Now let's talk about those sisters. Worker honeybees. The vast majority of bees in a colony are worker honeybees. Now, workers do not lay eggs when queens are present. But remember, workers are female. And anything that can reproduce kind of wants to reproduce. So workers kind of have this innate desire to reproduce, but they won't do it as long as a queen is there. In the absence of a queen, and in the inability of a colony to make a new queen, some workers' ovaries can develop and they can lay eggs. But workers cannot mate. As a result, they only produce what kind of eggs? Drones. We call that laying workers. When a colony has laying workers, it is doomed. Because the females only produce drones. Drones don't do squat diddly, so the colony will die. It's impossible if you just purchase a queen in a cage to requeen those kinds of colonies, because those laying workers kind of take on the pheromonal bouquet of a queen, so the colonies think they have a queen, the workers think that they are a queen, so when you feed that colony new queens, the bees in the nest kill it, because they think they have one. So laying worker colonies are hard to solve. We're going to talk a lot about workers coming up. But before we get there, I think I'm a little bit out of the clicker's range, maybe. There we go. Now, good. All right. So now we're going to talk about the sex. Okay? Now this is how it happens. This is the reproductive organ of the male honeybee. Males' reproductive organs are stored inside of their bodies. Okay? It is inverted. It's inside their body. In order to evert it, to push it out, it takes nearly all of the blood that they have in their body. So in the process of copulating, it's forced out. The drone falls over backwards, paralyzed, because all the blood is not in his body, it's somewhere else. And this ultimately kills him. So what you're seeing here is a drone that's partially and fully everted. I'll use all the science names for the young ears in the crowd. This is the endophallus, the inside phallus. Make sense? All right. Sorry, it is skipping a little bit. Now the queens have a set of reproductive organs inside their bodies as well. We use some of the same terminology that human females do. Queens have ovaries, paired ovaries, one on either side of the body. And these ovaries are made of strands, you see those strands, of ovarioles. And those ovarioles are just tubes. Basically, at the start of the tube, you get a baby egg, And as that egg migrates down the tube, it matures. And by the time the egg reaches the bottom, it is a fully mature egg. And she'll pass it down these tubes, out the center here, and lay it. Okay? So essentially, these are underdeveloped eggs. These are fully developed eggs ready to lay as it moves down that ovariole. At this point, you might wonder, how do we get fertilized and unfertilized eggs? Well, this is what's the amazing thing. Queens have along their reproductive tract a spermatheca. And like the name implies, spermatheca, it is an organ that collects and holds the semen from all the drones with whom she mates. This is a spermatheca from a virgin queen. It looks like a crystal ball. It's clear. This is a spermatheca from a mated queen. It's full of the semen that the drone deposited. Because the queen can live 2 to 3 years or longer, and because she only mates the first couple weeks of her life, she is able to keep and nourish the semen that she collects from drones up to 3 years alive in her spermatheca without cryogenics, without any of the stuff that we have to do to achieve the same purpose. So sperm require lots of oxygen, they require lots of nutrients. So essentially what the queen has here is a sperm incubator. She just keeps that stuff alive. That spermatheca is covered in a net, a tracheal net that pumps the oxygen into that spermatheca to keep those sperm alive, so that when she passes an egg down the chute, she can withhold semen or release semen to fertilize that egg, and that's how she controls whether or not it's fertilized when it finally comes out. So the drone puts it there, the queen controls it once it's there. She has all this muscle structure around through here that releases semen or withholds it, squeezes the egg out and stuff like that. Make sense? Fascinating? All right, let's keep going. Now, how does this happen? Well, if the queen mates in the colony, the only drones available to her are her brothers. And when queens mate with their brothers, the worker bees can detect whether an egg is inbred or not and abort it. Explain that to me. So queen might lay 50,000 eggs over the course of a few weeks, and worker bees can tell which one of those come from pairings between her and her brothers. And they selectively remove those from the colony. No one's figured out how they do that yet, but it happens. It's a good PhD project someday, students. All right, let's keep moving on. It all happens then, not in the nest, but in the air. Queens don't mate in the nest because their brothers are available to them. So they leave the colony when they're 8 to 10 days old. They fly about a mile from the colony looking for drones. So that's the queen. Hold that thought for just a minute. All the colonies in the area, every day at the same time, all the sexually mature drones leave the nest from all the colonies in the area, and they congregate at the same spot the males do, the drones do, and we call those drone congregation areas, DCAs. Drones congregate at drone congregation areas, and all the males hang out at these places waiting for virgin queens to come through. So a colony may produce 10,000 drones in a year and 2 queens. So statistically, the average drone has a 1 in 2 to a 1 in 5,000 chance of ever fulfilling his purpose. The vast majority of drones never mate and just simply die old. Only a teeny tiny fraction find the queen, because what happens is when the queen comes zooming through these areas where the drones are congregating, these big clusters of drones will chase her. We call those drone comets. So these drones are chasing the queen. The fastest drone catches her, mounts her, makes her, falls to the ground dead after it's done because of all that it took to make it happen. And the queen instantly goes and mates with another drone. The queen mates with, on average, about 15 to 20 drones. This is the key, because science has completely changed the way we think about this. She does this usually on 1, maybe 2 mating flights. She spends about 10 minutes at that DCA and that's all she needs. Each drone takes about 1 to 2 seconds. So essentially, she spends 10 minutes flying to a DCA, 10 minutes mating with drones, 10 minutes flying back, and that's it. She never leaves the nest again to mate. People used to think that queens go out on multiple mating trips over successive days, but that has now been shown to be not true. That's why it's so critical during queen mating season that we have good weather. Because if you have 2 weeks of bad weather and the queen fails to mate, all she can do is lay unfertilized eggs. The fewer drones she mates with, the quicker she runs out of semen. Queens can fail. Make sense? So let's talk about the process quickly. The queen will fly through the air, the drone will catch her. All the hemolymph rushes into the endophallus, pushes it into her. He falls over backwards, paralyzed, while depositing his semen there. That she collects with muscles and squeezes it up into her spermatheca, drops his dead body to the ground, and moves on to the next one. That's fascinating. There's a whole book about it. It's good nighttime reading. So, I want you to think about the implications of this, though. A queen, every bee in the nest has the same mama. Well, let's just make the math easy for my small brain. Let's say the queen mated with 10 drones. Then that means any 2 eggs only have a 1 in 10 chance of having the same mama and the same daddy. We call that super sisters in social insects. When 2 workers have the same mom and the same dad, those are super sisters. Otherwise, the vast majority of them are just half sisters. So why do queens mate with multiple drones? It's real simple. Each drone confers different genetics, different traits to that colony. So what the queen is doing is ensuring a great homogenized mixture of positive traits that collectively push that colony forward. Does that make sense? All right. Good. So that's the end of bee mating 101. Now, I've told you that she'll deposit that egg in a cell. Out of that egg will come a grub, a larva. That larvae is simply an eating machine. That little white grub sits down there in the bottom of the cell, eating in a circle like this, while worker bees have glands in their heads, around their mouth. The worker bees go up to these cells and spit into these cells, and the larvae eat it. The average worker larva, which is only about a 7-day period, the average worker larva is visited 2,700 times before she is given all the food that she needs to survive. Once that larva gets everything she needs to survive, the worker bees will cap over the top of that cell. That larva will stand up, and then she will begin to pupate or turn into an adult bee. Okay? So honeybees do complete metamorphosis. Egg, larva, pupa, adult. All 4 stages. The larvae are the eating machine stage. The pre-pupae here turned into a pupa, and then the adult. The funny thing about this is it's gorgeous. Look at this. I mean, you know, to me all of life is amazing. All of existence is amazing, but this is pretty crazy. Bees go from an egg to an adult while passing through a worm stage in 21 days. Worker bees go from egg to adult in 21 days. You can see here in this image all that glossy, milky looking stuff that those little worker larvae are floating in. That is the glandular secretion. That is the food that the worker bees made and spit up into that cell so those little grubs could eat it. Honeybees are the only bees that do something like this. All other bees feed their young nectar and pollen exclusively. Honeybees actually produce food to give to them. There are not a lot of organisms on the planet that produce food on which one of their stages of development can fully develop. We call that a true food, a food on which an organism can fully develop without the need for anything else. is a true food. There's only one other good example of organisms that produce a true food. And what is that? It's mammals. Mammals produce milk. Milk is a glandular secretion on which our young can fully develop. I have 4 kids, and all of them were nursed by my wife, right? So all of them fully developed on milk. Okay, so this is what you get. Incidentally, you're going to hear beekeepers talk about uncapped brood and capped brood. Uncapped are simply the larval and egg stages because there's no capping on that cell. Right? Uncapped brood. Capped brood are the pupal and the prepupal stages. This stage right here should be capped like that. Just the photographer removed those cappings so that you could see the larvae standing up. So egg, larvae, prepupae, pupae, adult. Okay? The workers take about 21 days to develop, the drones take about 24 days to develop, and the queens take about 16 days to develop. Queens develop faster, probably because they're just given this amazing, rich, voluminous amount of food. So they're getting fed a lot. In fact, let's look at that. Queen bees don't, so let me start over. Worker bees and drones develop in horizontally oriented cells, like this. Queen bees develop in cells that are hanging upside down. We call those queen cells. You're seeing a queen cell coming out of the comb amidst a lot of other worker-sized cells. So typically what will happen is you see all these worker bee-sized cells around, but this cell, rather than being able to look into the end of it, it's coming out and turning down. The queen bee will lay an egg up in there. Out of that egg will come a larva. I hope you can look at this picture and flash back about 2-3 slides ago to the worker bees sitting in a pool of food. You can see worker bees are sitting in just enough food to get them by. Queens are given so much food they can't eat it all. They're essentially fed ad lib. Ad libitum, for those of you who take Latin. Right? So they're just floating in a pool of royal jelly. In fact, there is so much food in that queen cell, the queens don't eat it all. When the bees finally cap those cells, you'll see that there's leftover royal jelly that's not eaten. If you've ever opened a queen cell, that orangey brownish goop at the top, that's dried up royal jelly that the queen never ate while she was developing. 16 days later, she'll emerge from that cell. Now drones, just the born old men, they come out of cells that are slightly bigger. So if you look at this comb, all of these are worker-sized cells. These big, large cells right here in the middle are drone-sized cells. So I think I'm going to kind of show you all of them on a single comb. The vast majority of cells on a comb are dedicated to workers. You can see these few drone cells that are larger and coming out of deformed areas on the comb. And these small cells that are beginning to come out and turn down are queen cups that will later be fully matured and turned into queen cells. Do you see the 3 differences? That's important because when you're reading a frame, that's what you're seeing when you're looking at it. Now, I need to get my phone so that I can keep myself on track. My watch died a long time ago, and like most other people in the United States, it was replaced with a phone. There we go. Perfect. All right. So now we're going to focus in on the workers because despite all the stuff that I just told you about queens and drones, the workers really are the most amazing bees in the nest. So worker bees are given the name worker because they do all the work in the colony, right? So, I know this is a big fancy science word, but I just want you to kind of ease it through with me for just a second. Worker bees, unlike workers and other social insect nests, worker bees are not born into a task in which they remain their whole life. Worker bees, as they age, move from task to task to task to task. That's unlike ants that usually are born and this is what they do. That's their thing. Worker bees, on the other hand, they're born and they progress through a series of tasks as they get older. Scientists give it a big fancy word, temporal polyethism, which simply means time, many behaviors. So depending on the time, you're going through many behaviors. Beekeepers call this age-related division of labor. Depending on how old you are, will dictate what you do at that stage. So as a result, worker bees have this kind of predictable series of tasks that we can expect them to be at as they reach certain developmental milestones in their adulthood. Okie dokie. Let's look at some of those. The vast majority of bees spend the first half of their lives doing things inside the nest and the last half of their lives doing things outside of the nest. So for example, the first thing they do when they come out is clean cells. Then they begin to cap brood and tend brood and attend to queen and receive nectar and clean debris and pack pollen and comb build. And then the things that they do outside the colony are ventilating the nest, guarding, foraging, etc. We'll talk about these kind of in detail. So as a bee ages, think about it this way. As a bee ages, she moves from the center of the nest progressively towards the outside of the nest. And that's actually true. The tasks that she's doing on her teenage years are on the perimeter of the combs, and the tasks that she does in her adulthood are all outside. She literally moves from the center to the outside depending on her age. So one of the first things they do is clean cells. Like the name implies, they go into cells, they lick them, they remove debris, they ready those cells to receive nectar, pollen, or baby bees. The next group of bees will either attend the queen. We call this retinue behavior. This is the queen and her retinue. And these workers' only job is to lick the queen, lick the queen, lick the queen, clean the queen, clean the queen, clean the queen, feed the queen, feed the queen, feed the queen. People think that they're licking the queen to clean her, and that's not actually true. They're licking the queen to acquire her pheromones and spread them throughout the nest to tell all the rest of the bees that may be as far as 3 feet away from the queen that we have a queen. It's pretty cool, huh? So all that's happening at this very important behavior that we all think that, oh, they're just listening to the queen for orders. Not true. Okay? Another interesting thing is the worker bees eat honey. We're going to get to this more in a minute, but they eat honey for their fuel. Honey is not bee food. It is bee fuel. It's like gasoline in the engine. It moves the bee. So by the time they get really old, they're only really eating honey. But super young worker bees, the first about 7 to 12 days of their life, they eat a lot of pollen. And that pollen helps their glands develop. And when their glands are sufficiently developed, they are then able to produce the food for the baby bees, and then we call them nurse bees. They nurse the babies. But it takes them about a week before their glands are developed, which is why at about a week they become nurse bees. So the adult bees that eat the most amount of pollen are the young nurse bees. They're the ones that have the demand for pollen in the nest. Don't worry about reading this. I'll tell you essentially what it says. At this stage, they graduate to a new task called nectar ripening. Most people think that bees go out in the field, they bring in nectar, and they just go into the colony and go wiggle through the nest to find a cell to put it in. Well, that's not true. There are actually worker bees whose job it is to be at the nest entrance. And right when the field bees come in, they unload those field bees of their nectar. Those are nectar receiving and processing bees. Those bees will then take the nectar and go find a cell to put it in. But before they do that, nectar has too much water in it to be honey. So those nectar processing bees will blow a bubble with the nectar and suck it in. And blow a bubble with the nectar and suck it in. And blow a bubble with the nectar and suck it in. And they'll do this for a few minutes, which starts the process of evaporation. Once they get it sufficiently evaporated from their own mouths, they then deposit it in the cells to continue the process. So that's this age of worker bee, the nectar receivers. About 20 minutes of blowing bubbles and sucking it in, blowing bubbles and sucking it in, blowing bubbles and sucking it in. At that point, the bees graduate to storing and processing pollen, which is what you see here in these cells, and they begin cleaning the colony. They're responsible for keeping the colony clean. Next, you have worker bees who begin to produce the wax that they use to develop their combs. Honeybees are remarkable in many ways. Most social insects, ants, wasps, termites, etc., use nature to create their nest. For example, the wasps come to my back porch and chew on the wood. They take that wood with them and chew up the wood, mix it with saliva, and turn it into the paper that they make their nest out of. You know that, right? All wasp nests just come from wood that the wasps are out there chewing. In fact, wasps have favorite chewing poles. I know where those poles are in my backyard, and I can go watch the wasps chew the poles, or you can see the little wasp bite marks from where they just come back and forth to those poles to collect wood to go make their nest. Honeybees, on the other hand, don't use nature. They secrete their colonies. When nectar goes into a wax-producing bee, wax comes off the belly. There are special glands on the underside of the bee that secrete wax. We call them wax glands. So they eat nectar, wax comes out. You can see this wax, these wax scales flaking off the bottom, the underside of a worker bee. They will get these wax scales, chew them up, and fashion the combs that you and I know as the honeycomb. So that's this age bee, about 12 days old. Then you kind of get the teenage years where the bees are, I don't want to be in the house anymore. I get to go out and do my own thing now. You guys are all stupid, right? The teenage years. So they start their orientation flights. What they'll do is they'll leave the nest, they'll hover around the entrance, and then they'll go back in. Then they'll leave the nest a little further and hover around the entrance and go back in. Then they'll go out even further and hover around the entrance and go back in. Essentially, they're trying to figure out where home is. Once they do that for a few times and can put their home in context with the surrounding landscape, they begin to graduate towards those outside the colony tasks. We call these things orientation flights. And a lot of people will go to their colonies on warm days and there's a mess load of bees out hovering around the colony and they all just go right back in. And they don't know what happened. That was a group of bees orienting to the nest. They're trying to figure out where home is. Then you get bees that graduate to the next task. Guard bees. These bees sit at the colony entrance. They are always in this defensive posture. The back 4 legs are on the ground. The front 2 legs are in the air. And they're waiting for something to pass by. When that something passes by, they kind of grab at it and then come back. And then grab at it and then come back. And if it's something that they don't like, when they grab at it, they start an assault. So these are the guard bees. You can recognize that defensive posture. It's pretty cool, isn't it? It's almost like they're doing like this, saying, come on in, sucker. I got you. Now you have the bees, the honeybees with which you interact. Okay, the ones that you actually see because they're outside the nest. These are the foragers. They go foraging for food. Now here's the dealio. Honeybees leave a nest to collect one of 4 things. First thing is water. They drink the water, but they also sprinkle droplets around the nest. And when they sprinkle droplets around the nest, there's a cohort of bees who stand at the nest entrance and fan their wings. This circulates air in the nest, it evaporates the water droplets and cools the colony. Okay? So they will collect water to drink it or to evaporate and cool the nest. Bees will also go and collect anything sticky. They prefer to go to plants, trees that are producing, sorry. I've been talking quite a bit this week, so this is kind of the end of a whole lot of talking. So hopefully I'll be able to make it till 12. I'm sure I will. Thank you. I think I know what's on there. So essentially what happens is when the bees go out and collect these sticky rosins, they will bring these rosins back to the nest and glue everything in the nest together. Beekeepers use that sticky stuff. We call that term propolis. So propolis is simply the sticky stuff that bees collect from plants to gum up their hives. So that's the second thing they collect. The third thing that they collect is that they will go to flowers to collect pollen. As I have shared already, pollen is their protein, vitamin, mineral, nutrient source. It is what grows bees. Pollen is what they use to produce more bees. Pollen they feed the baby bees to grow the baby bees, and pollen is what the young adult bees eat to grow up. Bees don't go to flowers to help flowers. They don't wake up in the morning saying, what flowers can I go help today? They actually go to collect that pollen and eat it. The fourth and final thing that they collect from flowers is they'll go and collect the sugar water that's inside the flowers. We call that sugar water nectar. They convert that nectar into honey that you and I like to put on biscuits. Okay? Now, I'm going to talk to you about 3 more things before there's a break. This one is extremely important. So I hope you hang out with me on this one. Now, at this point, I've been putting a huge emphasis on discussing bees as individuals. The queen, the drone, this is what the workers do, etc. But it is important not to think about a colony as a box full of individuals. People who study social insects, entomologists who study social insects, bees, wasps, ants, etc., we have a term for social insect colonies that we use, and that term is superorganism. It's not super like it's just a great organism. It's super in the sense that the prefix super means above. How many of you know that the boxes that we put on colonies are called supers? Do you know why they're called super? Because as a prefix, the word means above. You put the boxes above. You super the colony. There you go. Free knowledge. Did you have to pay for today? Okay, free knowledge. Good. I didn't know. Alright. So, superorganism simply means above the organism level. Drones, queens, and workers are organisms. The colony is a superorganism. What that simply means is that the bees function as a single unit, so much so that the colony itself can be viewed as the beast. Does that make sense? So the colony is an organism, a superorganism. It's above the organism level. And let me explain what that means. In order for us to use the term superorganism, the colony must do what organisms do. What do organisms do? They reproduce, they eat, etc. Well, if you think about this, and I'm going to get away from this topic soon, I promise, and get on what's really important. If you think about this, it is not a bee's goal in life to make more bees. Otherwise, they would just grow their colonies to the sun. But it's not a bee colony's goal in life to have the strongest colony on the planet. It is a bee colony's goal in life to take one colony and make it 2. Did you see the difference? They're not trying to make more bees, they're trying to make more colonies. As a result, reproduction in superorganisms, bees, social wasps, and social ants. Well, social wasps are bad idea. Bees and ants, social bees and ants. Reproduction in superorganism is the production of more colonies and not more individuals. Beekeepers call this term swarming. The reason this is important to understand is because swarming is honeybee colony reproduction. And just like reproduction is the strongest drive to control in anything that can reproduce. Can I get an amen? Reproduction in bee colonies is an extremely strong desire that is hard to stop. This is important because the bees want to swarm more than anything. But if you want to produce honey, you want them not to swarm more than anything. So management for honey production is management to try to control their strongest desire. Did you get that? How good are you at controlling your strongest desire? Exactly. And we're not so good at controlling other things, strong desires either. So that is so helpful to think about. If you think about swarming any other way, then you've lost it. But think about it this way. That colony is doing everything in a year to make sure, everything about that bee colony's life is to split. And if you think about it that way, you'll understand why bees do what they do all year long. And you'll understand why they swarm. Now, let's talk about swarming specifically. Because if you don't learn a lot about swarming, you're going to suffer as a beekeeper. Right? All right, so what happens? Bee colonies want to split more than anything. They'll make new queens. Before the first new queen emerges, the old queen and somewhere between 30 and 70% of the worker bees in the nest will leave the nest. Queen does not make that decision. The workers make that decision. The workers say, honey, it is time to go, let's go. Queen makes no decision. The workers rush her out of the nest. They all fly around. The queen looks for the first thing she can settle on. It's usually a tree limb. She'll settle there. All the worker bees in the air will land on that queen and form these big clusters. Now this is important to know because that parent colony, the one that just issued that swarm, is trying to produce new queens. The reason that they swarm before they find a new home, now why don't they just go to their new home? Why do they do this? And the reason they do this is for a couple of reasons. Number one, they've got to get out of the nest before new queens are born. Otherwise, the old queen and the new queens will fight and you might end up with nobody. Number two, bees use dances to communicate the new home sites that they want to move into, but they also use dances to forage. So if they're all in the nest and this one's dancing saying we need to move over there, this one's dancing saying we need to go collect honey, everything gets confused. So they leave the nest before the new queens emerge, and they sit in this holding pattern, sending off scout bees in every direction. Those scout bees are looking for cavities. Not cavities, but cavities. Structures that have hollow areas in which they can nest. Walls, chimneys, trees, boxes. Old Volkswagen Beetles that you haven't taken out of your yard in 32 years. Right? They're looking for cavities. And those worker bees are canvassing and this is fascinating. There's a whole talk that a brilliant scientist from Cornell gives on this. I'm trying not to give this whole talk, but it's so fascinating. I think you can hear this. They go and scour the entire area and find all the cavities that are suitable. They then come back to this cluster and dance on the outside of that cluster to communicate to their sisters, my cavity is the best. And the other worker says, no, my cavity is the best. And the other worker says, no, my cavity is the best. And they do this democratically. It actually works. I mean, we can take a lot of lessons from this. They do this democratically. And once they identify the optimum cavity in the area, the bees will drop off of this structure and move into it. And research has shown that bees fly to optimum cavities like 99% of the time. Like the vast majority of the time, they pick the best available nesting site in the area. And all that's happening. If you go up to a cluster like this, there'll be bees dancing all over it. So think about this. The longer it takes the bees to find a new home, the more time they spend hanging in that little holding pattern. It can take hours or days. When swarm season comes around, it's common for me to get a lot of phone calls. Jamie, I got a cluster of bees on my back porch. What do I do? And I say, wait. Because they're going to go away. Probably into your wall, but that's okay too. I'm just kidding. Usually these holding patterns are pretty close to where the parent colony is, so they're unlikely to nest right here. All right, I think all of my subsequent slides say that, so I'm going to kind of breeze through it. What's interesting from this slide, don't worry about reading it, but remember the queen doesn't make the decision to leave. As an egg layer, she's too heavy to fly. But worker bees feed her. So what they do is when they've got to get a queen down to flying weight, they start withholding food from her. And then they'll get on her back and shake, which causes her to run around the nest. And this might be a huge surprise to you, but what happens in the colony is diet and exercise makes the queen bee lose weight. Not carbs or lack thereof, not meat or lack thereof, not veggies or lack thereof, just less food and move, honey. She loses weight, she gets down to her flying weight, and when she gets down to her flying weight, they're out of that nest, and that's what that slide says, I think. Bees are crazy. And that's what you thought you were coming today to learn about something that vomits into a cell that you harvest and eat that vomit. No, there's so much more going on in the nest. Now, it's important to think about this, and I promise, the reason I spend so much time on swarming is because it's the thing that most beekeepers screw up. Okay? So, think about this from a bee's perspective. When are they most likely to swarm? They are most likely to swarm when the richest, best available resources are out there. That swarm left everything it had, has to move into a hollow and use the environment to build comb, to store honey, to have babies, and to store enough of that honey to survive the coming winter. Bees want to do two things in life. They want to swarm and they want to survive winter. That's why they store honey. So consequently, when do bees swarm? They swarm in anticipation of the major nectar flow. Bees start swarming when the vast amount of nectar is about to become available. As a result, when do they swarm? They swarm right when you want your colonies as strong as possible. So what are some things that lead to swarming? The production of drones. Why does the production of drones lead to swarming? Because they're producing virgin queens. If this colony is producing virgin queens in its swarm season, all the colonies in the area are producing virgin queens in its swarm season. So they all crank up drone production. The increase in drone production signals to the bees that, hey, it's okay, we can swarm now because there's enough drones in the environment for those queens to make it. Congestion in a colony population begins to explode in spring. This thing here, though, is what I wish you would tattoo to your brain forever if you want to be a serious beekeeper. This is kind of a fictitious nectar flow, but it's a stylized one, but it's still pretty accurate. Let's just pretend, for example, that we live in an area where the most amount of nectar is available in April, May, and June. Incidentally, this is pretty accurate for our area. As a result, where on this curve are bees going to swarm? They're going to start right here, because that maximizes the amount of nectar available to produce their comb. If they swarm right here, they're in trouble. In fact, research has shown the later into the nectar flow that bees swarm, the less likely that colony is to survive. There's just not enough resources out there to build their nest and survive the coming winter. Fascinating? All right. So, when do they most want to swarm? When you most want to keep them. So swarm control is beekeeping for honey production. If you want to produce honey, you got to control this. That's not what this talk is about. You have to go to a talk on swarm control to figure out how to do it. So consequently, when do swarms occur? When I told you. So weather impacts swarm tendencies. The age of the queen impacts swarm tendencies. The older queens that tend to swarm. Sorry, I think I'm a little bit faster than my data projector here. There we go. So when you start seeing queen cells in spring, you can bet your colonies have something on their mind. It's like when your daughter starts getting a lot of texts, you know there's some guy out there. It's the same thing here, right? When there's lots of queen cells popping in the colonies, you can know that they're starting to try to swarm. This tells you, congratulations, you've lost. You go in your colony in March or April and see this, you have lost. What does this tell you? Well, it tells me that one queen emerged normally from the end of her cell. That queen then went and found all the other queen cells. She bit holes in them and stung her developing sisters to death before they could get away. There ain't going to be two mamas in that nest. She took out her competition. This tells me that a swarm has already happened. The fact that there is a new virgin queen out, especially if it's April or May, there's a virgin queen out, the competition's dead, I just lost half of my bees. Now let's do some simple math. This is the beauty of math. You thought you were going to escape math when you graduated school. Let's think about this. Your colony swarms, so I'm going to tell you something. The average major nectar flow is about 6 weeks. Last week of April through May, first week of June, 6 weeks. All right? Your colonies want to swarm March, mid-April. It takes about 2 weeks. Let's just round it off this way. When a colony swarms, it takes about a week for the queen to emerge from that cell. It takes about 2 weeks for her to mate and start laying eggs. It takes about 3 weeks, 1, 2, 3, for that first egg to emerge as an adult worker bee. How long is that, boys and girls? 6 weeks. When your colony swarms, you've lost that season's honey production. You get it? So important to hang on to that thought. We're going to pop on down to 2 other things quickly before I'll let you go for a break. And then we come back and actually start talking about beekeeping. Now, there are 2 more things that I really want you to know that's just cool about bees. Number 1 is that the colonies, as an organism, thermoregulate. I'm going to tell you something that's pretty fascinating. Honeybees are insects. They are cold-blooded. The colony is warm-blooded. Honeybees are able to thermoregulate their nest. When it's 150 degrees outside, it's 95 degrees in the nest. When it's 30 degrees outside, it's 95 degrees in the nest. The bee is cold-blooded. The nest is warm-blooded. It's that superorganism concept. Honeybee colonies are warm-blooded organisms. You get that? So how do they thermoregulate? Well, it's real simple. When it's hot, they spread out, they fan air through the nest as it cools it down. When they're cold, they cluster together, it warms up the nest, and the temperature warms up, right? It's just by virtue of thermoregulating. That's what all of that shows, but it essentially tells you what I just said. So that's pretty fascinating. Not many things have to thermoregulate in North Florida, though. It doesn't really get super cold here. Cold enough to where our bees sort of make clusters in the winter. The last thing I'm going to tell you before the break. You were going to tell me to take a break, weren't you? But I knew that.
Well, we want to get the marriage.
We're getting you. I'm there, man. All right. You ready? Last thing I want to tell you before the break. So, bees are not Southern Baptists. I'm a Southern Baptist, but honeybees are not. These honeybees dance. Southern Baptists don't. It's a joke. I can say that as a Southern Baptist. I happen to dance, but I was just joking. You missed it. That's okay. Maybe all of you are Baptists. Baptists preach against dancing. I don't know why. It's crazy, but we do. But anyway. Bees are not Baptists, they dance. So, let's talk about this dance. One of the ways that bees communicate is they communicate by dancing. They also communicate by pheromones, but I want to talk about the dancing. Bees have 3 kinds of dances that I'm going to tell you about before the break. One is the circular dance. That's what's happening here. I like the name implies they just kind of go in a circle. The circular dance means the bee who is dancing has found a really good food source that's somewhere in the neighborhood of about 10 to 50 feet from the colony. So within about 50 feet, maybe 150 feet of the colony, close to the colony. The circle dance does not communicate distance, it does not communicate direction, it just says food is close. And while they're dancing, they smell like the food, they pass some of the food to the other bees have learned what they have to go out and find. But the interesting dance, the one that most people know about, is the waggle dance. And it's a figure-8 dance. Imagine that this screen is a comb. The bees have a pattern where they'll have a straight run and go around, and a straight run and go around, and a straight run and go around. It's kind of a figure-8. And that straight run, relative to up on the comb, I'm going to explain this, tells you where the food source is in relation to the sun. On the face of a comb, the sun is always up. So when the bee dances a straight run and it points straight up and goes down and straight up and down and straight up, what she is telling her sisters who are watching the dance, that you need to leave the nest, find the sun, and go in that direction. Through the vigor that they shake and through the vibrations that they're passing through their feet into the comb, they are communicating the distance in that direction. It is so accurate that people can be trained to interpret this, mark the dancing bee, themselves go find the food source, and wait for that marked bee to arrive. That's how accurate it is and how we can watch it and interpret it and know it. So all of that's being communicated in that dance. So think about it this way. As I've shared with you, when the straight run is up and she goes around and up and around and up and around, she has told her sisters in the hive You need to fly in the direction of the sun. Here she's 60 degrees, she's this way, around, this way, around, this way, around. She's 60 degrees to the left of up. The food source is 60 degrees to the left of the sun. She dances 120 degrees to the right. The food source is 120 degrees to the right. She dances straight down. The food source is directly away from the sun. That by itself is pretty fascinating. Trick question. Be ready. I know it's a Saturday morning, but be ready for this question. What happens while the bees are out there foraging? What happens to the sun? Okay, that's the trick. The sun doesn't move. The earth turns, but it gives the appearance that the sun's moving across the sky. Well, that sun is the bee's compass. So she can internally recalculate based on how long she was in the field and still make it back to her nest even though the sun moved across the sky. Fascinated yet? Because what happens to the sun on a cloudy day? Bees can't see it, but bees have 5 eyes. They have one big one here, one big one here, and 3 in the middle. And the 3 in the middle can pick up polarized light and they can see the sun even when it's behind clouds. So that bee is fully equipped as a navigation unit to leave the nest, go exactly where she's told to go, get exactly what she's told to get, and come exactly back to the spot she lives, despite whatever happens while she's out in the field. I'll tell you one more amazing thing, and I'm going to stop. I promise I'm going to stop. Mr. McChesney. He believes me. You shouldn't believe me. Which is a hard statement to say, because how can you believe that statement if you can't believe it? Right? Just logic. Some of you don't. Alright, so the other thing I want to tell you is bees, when they're foraging for pollen, are built to carry pollen. They're covered in hair. If you pluck my hair out and stick it under a microscope, my hair is a straight shaft. If you pluck a bee hair out and stick it under a microscope, that hair's got fingers that come out on both sides of it. So bees' hairs are branched. They have lots of split ends, and it's okay. Alright? So bees' hairs are branched. When they are flying through the air, they are building up an electrostatic charge on those hairs. When they touch the face of that flower, the pollen, which is oppositely charged, jumps onto their body. They've got a lot of slow-mo footage of bees landing on flowers and pollen just going shoo. And then bees have these rakes on their legs. They rake that pollen off, they moisten it with honey, and they stick it on their back leg and transport it back to the colony. But they have an amazing apparatus to collect nectar too. If they're nectar collectors, they go out, they stick out that tongue, they suck up the nectar like a straw. The nectar goes into I will call it a pre-stomach. It's not the stomach, where digestion starts, in this case the stomach. It's something before the stomach, which is called the crop, which is essentially the nectar carrying device. They suck it up, it goes to the bee's crop, they get to the colony, and they spit it out to their sisters, and that's why everybody says honey is bee vomit. But it's not vomit, because vomit comes from the stomach. It's pre-vomit. It comes from the crop. So we got to work on our marketing campaigns. All right. So all of that happens. Now listen, you didn't learn a lick about beekeeping in that talk. If you did, I didn't do my job. What I wanted to just tell you, the first half of me speaking to you, is that this thing that you want to put in your white boxes is just plain cool. There's a lot more going on there than what we think. I even scratched the surface. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. McChesney, but when it's my turn again, which I don't know will probably be in 20 minutes, 30 minutes, we're going to get into, now let's put all of this together in a nice package we call beekeeping. Okay? Makes sense? Thank you guys so much for listening.
Thank you. Okay. We're going to take a break. Our mayor of Alachua is going to come up here and read a proclamation proclaiming today National Honeybee Day in the city of Alachua. And she wants to take pictures. And then our honey queen is going to make a drawing for door prizes. Door prizes right out this door. And for those of you that weren't here earlier, the Alachua City Mayor Mayor Jim Cooper right here is a great supporter of Honeybee. Several years ago, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago, he had a nest of bees living in his tree. They had a nice little comb, and he called me. He said, Chappie, would you come get the bees out of my yard? I did, and I said, well, what I want to do, I want to put them in a new box and bring them back and put them back in your yard. But being the mayor, he's busy. He runs all the time, so he can't do that. So that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Mayor Jim Cooper.
This bee's got a pretty good GPS system. I wish my car's GPS worked as well as that. And the city of Alachua is really glad to support what's going on here with Chappie and the beekeepers. Whereas the honeybee is critical to the process of pollination with one bite of food in 3 benefiting directly or indirectly from honeybee pollination. And whereas honeybees are essential for production of more than 90 food crops, and bee pollination is responsible for 15 billion in added crop value. And whereas honeybees face significant threat from colony collapse disorder, which has been linked with disease, pathogens, parasites, environmental stress, loss of natural habitat, and inappropriate use of pesticides and herbicides, among other factors. And whereas the honeybee works together with other bees on the bee colony as a single vibrant living organism and helps to maintain healthy ecosystems. And whereas the United States Department of Agriculture is working in cooperation with other federal agencies, universities, industry, and additional partners to find ways to improve honeybee health and habitat. Now, therefore, for further awareness of honeybee and its importance to agriculture, food systems, and the economy, I give Cooper, Mayor of the City of Alachua, representing the city and the City Commission, who hereby proclaim August 22nd, 2015 as National Honeybee Day. Thank you all.
Okay, we want to thank the mayor of the city of Alachua and the commissioners. We really appreciate their support. This mayor goes the extra mile to show you that he will support beekeeping. In fact, he's volunteered. We're going to do a bee beard on him around 12 o'clock if Dr. Ellis is finished. So if you're going to eat now, it would be a good time, because once your head swells up, you can't eat too much. But he teased him. He knows we don't want him to be stung. And this young lady, she was also volunteering to do a bee beard. So if you've never seen one, please come around, stick around till 12. I'm sure you'll be here because Jamie's really entertaining. Isn't he a great speaker? He is fantastic. All right, that being said, our Miss American Honey Queen will do a drawing for a door prize.
Quick announcement first, we do have a silent auction out there, so you can go and see the items, you can write down your bid. I encourage trash talking each other, multiple bids, boxing out, all encouraged, all good. So go check out the silent auction, and I'm going to draw for a raffle prize. Six, 4, 8, 7, 3, 8. 7, 3, 8.
Here you are, right out the door.
Okay, we're going to do one more. Double your chances. 6, 4, 8, 7, 0, 4. 7, 0, 4. Awesome. Go claim your prize.